and welcome everyone to Unscripted, sports as it should be. I'm Hunter Smith with my co-host Robbie feeling alongside me.
4 teams have punched their ticket to San Antonio for the Final Four. We'll talk some college hoops and what Loyola Chicago, Michigan, Villanova, and Kansas have to do to take home a natty. Also, TCU football holds its pro day this Friday. We'll drop some insight on how these players can increase their chances to hear their name called on draft day.
And let's not forget about TCU baseball. The Frogs started off conference play with a sweep of Kansas State. We'll look at how the Frogs have fared so far this season and look ahead as the Frogs push for another trip to Omaha.
Now, Hunter, let's start off with some March Madness. What's your biggest takeaway from the Sweet 16 and Elite Eight games this past weekend?
I think my biggest takeaway is you can't count out Loyola Chicago. An 11 seed, Final Four. It's never happened before, or an 11 seed has never won a national championship, but I think this year you cannot count out Loyola Chicago. If you look, they've made more than 40% of their three-pointers this season, and their defense has been a top 20 defense all season. It's going to be interesting when they take on Michigan State. Michigan hasn't lost since February 6th. Loyola Chicago has not lost since January 31st. We're going to have 2 of the hottest teams left in the tournament facing off. It's going to be a good one.
So you have Chicago going to the finals and winning.
I have Chicago beating Michigan.
Okay, but not winning the whole thing?
I think they can. I don't know if necessarily they will.
Okay. Well, if you have them beating Michigan, I have Michigan actually have the best chances to win the national championship. And it's because of their defense. They have one of the most improved defenses throughout the tournament. And it's because of Xavier Simpson guarding at the point. And when they take on Loyola Chicago, the Loyola Chicago is going to have a hard time contesting shots from outside and inside the paint. Michigan over the past 12 games, they haven't allowed more than 70 points in the last 12 games, and only 2 teams have scored over 70. So it's going to be a good game for sure.
You bring up a good point because I also do think they have one of the best. Michigan has one of the best defenses remaining in the tournament. However, their offense is so inconsistent. Against Texas A&M, they hit almost 60% of their three-pointers, then come out against Florida State and shoot 4 of 22. They can't be that inconsistent and win the national championship overall. I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen. Is there any other takeaways you had from this past weekend?
Well, my biggest takeaway is that the Duke Blue Devils are not dancing anymore. They lost last night in an overtime thriller against the Kansas Jayhawks, and it was all because of Kansas senior guard Mikhailu, who drained a 3 with 30 seconds left to go in regulation, and that shot sent the game into OT, and the rest is history. Kansas beat Duke 85-81. Now, people are going to say that the turning point for the game was when the Jayhawks hit that three-pointer, but it wasn't. The biggest momentum swing was when Duke big man Wendell Carter fouled out of the game. Kansas drove to the lane, and Carter moved into position for what should have been a clear charge, but instead the officials ruled it a block, and Duke struggled without the presence of Carter for the remainder of the game because it opened up the floor for more space for Kansas to shoot on the perimeter and knock down more threes, which is exactly what happened.
Yeah, I had Duke winning it all in my bracket, so obviously that one's busted. But I mean, it's Kansas. When they get to the Elite Eight, that's never really been their strong suit. That's generally when they choked. That's why I had Duke beating them. I was wrong. We're going to take a short break, and when we get back, we're going to look at TCU baseball and TCU football pro day, what these guys have to do to make sure their name is called on draft weekend.
Before doers, dreamers, and trailblazers make their mark on the world, there was TCU. TCU, where dreams take their course.
Welcome back, everyone, to Unscripted. After a rough start to the season, TCU baseball started conference play on the right foot with a sweep against Kansas State this past weekend. Hunter, what is your takeaway from Kansas State game where the Bats finally started to generate some offense?
Well, as you just said, the Bats, they have not been that consistent this season, finally showing some consistency against Kansas State. Now, I think overall the performance was great. You have to take it with a little grain of salt because Kansas State is ranked last in the Big 12 in team pitching. They have an average of 5.44 ERA, so it is a step in the right direction, but as I said, take it with a grain of salt. I want to see how this team does against Texas Tech, who's top in the conference in team pitching. Actually, excuse me, no, that's TCU is top in the conference in team pitching. Yeah. But some of these better teams, like the Texas Techs, the Oklahomas, that are going to give them trouble down the road. Now, offensively in general, there has been some positives. The biggest thing is Josh Watson really had a bad slump last season. He only had 1 home run. He has 4 right now this year. He's second on the team, so he's been able to get back from that slump. And Michael Landestoy, believe it or not, is leading the team in batting average with a 3.28. Now that's interesting because the last 2 years it seems like the biggest issue with Landestoy was the reason he wasn't getting on the field, or the reason he wasn't getting out there, is because Connor Wanhanen was a better batter. And that's why Wanhanen was primarily first base instead of Landestoy. Now this year, they're both out there and Landestoy leading the team. Luken Baker doing what he does best. He's first on the team in home runs with 6, and he's tied for third in the Big 12. Now, one thing that improved this past weekend that has been an issue is the errors. TCU 23 errors in 21 games. That's not good. Now, we've talked about it before. They're not that far off of the amount of errors that they had last season. But they're mainly coming from the left side of the field, third base, shortstop, Connor Shepard, Adam Oviedo, 4 errors each. They've got to trim those down as we continue. Also, Connor Shepard giving up the most errors on the team, and also out of the starters has the worst batting average with a 1.58. Now again, looked better this game, but is this going to be a step in the right direction for the remainder, or was this just a great weekend because you were playing a good team? Now also, I'm a little bit curious too, because in these past 2 postseasons, it seems like the start of the season, the bats were great. They were generating a lot of offense. But once postseason rolls around, they would start to drop off. And it was only Luken Baker 2 years ago and then Evan Skoug last year that could really generate any offense. So this could be the year where bats start out a little quiet, but then end strong in the postseason, which that's what TCU has needed the last 2 years. So that's basically my takeaway from this game.
Well, let's throw the errors aside. I mean, it's a new infield. There's some new faces there.
Right. They are young, and I think a big part of this is they are adjusting to playing at the speed of college baseball, and more than and hopefully, as the season goes on, those errors are going to cut down, and they have. This last weekend showed it.
Offensively, who's the best hitter you think so far this season?
I mean, it has to be Baker because of just what he can do. I mean, he's one of the top hitters on the team, and he gets you the big plays. He on Friday against Kansas State, they were down. Baker hits a big home run, which pushes them to get the lead, and ultimately they don't win that game if Baker doesn't make that play. So he's the best hitter. He's the best hitter in terms of what he offers to the team.
Well, the Frogs play Dallas Baptist tomorrow night at 6:30 at home, and then they travel to Stillwater for a road series against the Oklahoma State Cowboys this weekend.
Now, TCU Pro Day is this Friday. Robbie, what players stand out the most to you?
So let's start with wide receiver John Diarse. Here's a player who has not gotten a lot of attention in this year's NFL draft. He wasn't invited to the Senior Bowl or the Combine, but if you're a team looking for a physical wide receiver, look no further. I think Diarse has the ability to play at the pro level and be a great addition for an NFL team. He's not going to burn defenses running down the field, not necessarily, but he's a tremendous route runner, and he has some of the strongest hands in college football. And once he gets that separation from the defensive backs, he'll just jump over guys and come down with the ball. And he finished his TCU career with 68 catches for over 1,000 yards. And he's a player that I'm really excited for. And I think he'll fly under the radar and be a surprise in this NFL draft.
He definitely can be a steal because, like you said, he's a great route runner and he has good hands. And I feel like those are 2 qualities that nowadays they seem to get overlooked when the players are drafted, and then it comes back to bite these teams in the butt later on. Like, look at Des Bryant and the whole fiasco that's going on right now with the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah.
The biggest issue, he's not that good of a route runner. So I agree. I think Diarse going to go under the radar, going to be a bit of a steal for whoever picks him up. And if he goes to the right system, who knows what can happen. Now, for me, a player that I think is really kind of unique is Nick Orr. So he spent majority of his time here playing safety. He knows all the safety positions: weak, free, strong, and he also knows corner because that's originally what he played his freshman year. Now, I don't think he is big enough to play safety in the NFL. Right now, he measures at 5'10", 187. At the pro day, I don't think he can he can't weigh in or measure in smaller than that, because I think that's going to it's going to cause teams to be a little scared with just how small he is. So he's not big enough to play safety, but I think he has the ability to play corner. Now, the big thing is they're going to have to look at, he's going to have to run well. He has to run a sub 4.6. And he's going to have to show the scouts that he can play corner. Because remember, he's played safety majority of his time at TCU. He's got to show the scouts that he has the hips and footwork to play corner. You know, as a corner, you start off in your back pedal, and then when that receiver breaks your cushion, you open up your hips in order to stay with him. So he's going to have to show them that he has that capability. But again, 3-year starter. He's played all 4 years because of special teams. He has an older brother that's played in the NFL. His dad played in the NFL. He has NFL genes. So I think as long as he runs well, measures well, I think someone will at least take a chance on him because they'll see him as an effective special teams guy.
Yeah, and you mentioned special teams. I think coming in, if he doesn't start right away at a defensive spot, he'll be a huge contributor on special teams.
And that's something that Gary,
which teams need in the NFL.
Exactly, and that's something that Coach Patterson has always stressed. You know, a lot of you guys, when you go out there, you're not gonna be a first or second string guy right away. You're gonna have to get on the field and prove your worth through special teams. And look at Tank Carter with Cleveland. He's the longest tenured player on the Cleveland Browns, mainly because he's a special teams guy.
Yep. Well, another player to watch for is running back Kyle Hicks. In his junior year, he rushed for over 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns. And this past season, he battled a hamstring injury, but ran for over 600 yards and 4 touchdowns. His biggest upside is his pass-catching ability outside the backfield. He can be a serious threat when a quarterback checks it down to him because he's an elusive runner, and he has the vision to make defenders miss and gain some serious yardage. Hicks ran a 4.63 in the combine, which is not terrible, but if he wants to impress NFL scouts before the draft, he's going to have to run a 4.6 on pro day, or under a 4.6 on pro day.
And I agree. The 40 time was the one thing that really stuck out to me at the combine is, I don't know. But he's not a guy that's going to necessarily burn a whole bunch of players. He's very shifty. He's going to be able to get you.
That's not who he is.
Yeah, he's going to put, in those short yardage situations, he's going to make guys miss. And like you said, an extremely, extremely good pass catcher. Actually led the team in receptions 2 years ago. So very, very good threat out of the backfield. I think he's a guy that someone is going to pick up, not necessarily going to use a draft pick to get him. I think he'll go as a undrafted free agent. Mm-hmm. But I think a team will give him a shot. Biggest question mark is going to be, can he stay healthy?
Yep.
Now, another guy that I want to look at, sticking on the defensive end, is Travin Howard. He's a guy, he's played linebacker majority of his time here. I don't think he's going to be able to play linebacker in the NFL. I think they're going to transition him to a safety. Right now he's listed 6'1", 213. I think that's a decent size for someone who wants to. Excuse me. That's a decent size for a guy who's going to try to play safety in the NFL. Now,
do you think he's fast enough to play safety?
I do.
As a transition from linebacker?
I do. I think Patterson had said going into this past season that all the linebackers can run. I want to say he said 5'4" or better. So I think he has the speed. Now, a little different. You got laser clocks and things like that, so it'll be skewed a little bit. But I think if he can run a sub 4.65, he should be good to go. Because as a safety, the reason why I have Nick Orr having to run faster is because you have to be faster to play corner. You can be a little slower and play safety. And just a little thing about Travin Howard. He's just like Nick Orr. He's a 3-year starter, and he's played all 4 years because he's been able to get on the field with special teams. Now, he led the team 3 straight years in tackles. So he knows how to get to the football. He knows how to chase people down. Yeah. So teams are going to know that. And he's also TCU's all-time leader in tackles. So I think he's going to have to show agility. It has to show the ability that he can cover, because he was able to cover well at the linebacker position, but it's a little bit different at the safety. And remember, he came in as a safety too, so he does have some experience there. I think it kind of goes back to Nick Gore. If Trayvon Howard can run well and show that agility and show that coverage, I think he can actually be drafted. And he could be a guy too that maybe they get as a safety and then decide to transition him once he gets to the NFL as a linebacker. But I think he will be drafted as a safety.
How high of a pick you think?
I would say 6th round. I mean, it's very often that TCU guys are projected to go much higher than the 4th or 5th. I think he can go 6. If he runs well, he'll go as a 6.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting to see what frogs are drafted come April. Pro Day is this Friday, so they have a chance to bolster their resume. Now to move on to top plays for the weekend. I said it earlier in the show. My top play came from the Duke-Kansas game. There were 6 lead changes in the final 6 minutes of the contest. By far one of the most competitive games of the tournament. But here we go. Top play from the weekend. Jayhawks down by 3. 30 seconds left. Devontae Graham dribbles, spins around a Duke defender, then dishes it out to Mikhailu, and the senior guard from Ukraine does the rest. Rock Chalk Jayhawk drains a 3 from downtown and sends the game into overtime. Kansas wins 85-81.
And busts my final bracket. Thanks, Jayhawks. But it is nice to have Kansas in the Final Four because now the Big 12 is the only team this year that had a Final Four and college playoff team.
True.
So congrats, Kansas. Good luck, I guess. Go Big 12. But so for my top play from the weekend, it was a little bit closer to home. Mine is from the San Antonio Spurs Utah Jazz game that happened this past Friday. So San Antonio was seeking to win their 6th straight game and stay in the playoff hunt as the West 3-8. It's 1 or 2 games. It's a very tight race there. So Spurs up 1 with under 40 seconds left. Rudy Gay floats it up, no good, but Aldridge gets the rebound, hooks it in, puts the Spurs up by 3. San Antonio would go on to win 124-120 and remain in the 6th seed in the Western Conference. So go Spurs, go. I'm still holding out. Kawhi, please come back.
Those are good top plays. Well,
yes.
That's all we got. This is Unscripted. I'm Robbie Fewing. This is Hunter Smith. Thanks for watching.